this animal right here. It's one of the bigger animals that I got. I would say this animal right here, he's on the bigger end. And you can tell he's some kind of a Brayford animal, right? I say, the whole thing about this is that, in terms of identifying beef cattle, it's not rocket science, right? I mean, this is very simple stuff. It's not confusing. It's not difficult, right? In terms of the bigger idea of things, in my local area, there are only 4 real major beef breeds, all right? You really only get 4 major beef breeds, but within these 4 major beef breeds, I mean, there are nuances, right? Like instead of an Angus you have a Balancer, or instead of an Angus you have a black Simmental. But even if you have a black Simmental, it's still a commodity animal, okay? As long as you can somewhat identify, as long as you can somewhat identify 4 major beef breeds, that's all there is to it. It's not difficult. The 4 major beef breeds are Angus, Hereford, Brahma, or Angus, Hereford, Charolais, and Brahma, right? I mean, those are the 4 major ones. And when I take a look at this animal's obviously some kind of a Brahma Hereford cross, right? This is not confusing. I mean, look at the head shape of the animal, look at the ear of the animal, and then look at the coloring of the animal, right? The animal has a white face, a red body, and big old ears, and a long face, right? So some kind of a Brahma Hereford cross. And this is one of my bigger animals, right? And I would say this is, this animal's probably about 575 pounds. 550, 575 pounds, something like that. This animal will be about 650 pounds by next month. That's also another one of my bigger animals, and that's some kind of an Angus animal, right? Some kind of an Angus animal, maybe a little bit of a Brangus, something like that. He's got the little stubby horns on him. They're not horns, but they're fake horns, right? And that's some kind of an Angus animal over there. And I would say he's probably, he's probably about 575 as well. And so, none of this stuff is very confusing. It's very simple, all right? In terms of head knowledge, I mean, none of this stuff is rocket science, right? Like when you watch me farm, I mean, the only thing that's really, really, really difficult in terms of a mental challenge, it's growing the grass. Because you probably don't understand this. Unless you do, you don't, right? If you slightly mess up your fertilizer program, you're effectively going to accumulate 0 biomass. All right, if you're in a situation where you have a phosphorus deficiency, and then you correct your phosphorus deficiency, and when you correct your phosphorus deficiency, you end up with a sulfur deficiency. And let's say that you correct the phosphorus deficiency, and as your grass is accumulating biomass, it develops a sulfur deficiency, but you think it's a nitrogen deficiency, and so you put nitrogen on your field, and your sulfur deficiency gets worse. Then your grass won't grow. Let's say that you have a phosphorus deficiency, and then you have a sulfur deficiency, and then you have a nitrogen deficiency, and then you have a potassium deficiency, and then you have et cetera, and then and if you don't use the right fertilizer, you will accumulate very, very, very minimal biomass, or you will accumulate none. The biomass that you do accumulate will not have good enough feed values to commercially raise your animals. And so, in terms of it actually gets kind of, but even then, growing grass, it's not very confusing once you know how to do it, right? I've always said, go out onto your field and take a look at the biomass of your field and diagnose the mineral deficiencies, all right? Every field is different. Once you know how to do it, it's not confusing, right? Sulfur and nitrogen look like they're very similar, but the thing about sulfur and nitrogen is that nitrogen is a mobile nutrient and sulfur is immobile, all right? So if they look very similar, but sulfur is an immobile nutrient, and so it will show deficiencies in the new growth, right? Where nitrogen is mobile, and so the plant will mobilize the nitrogen into the new growth if the plant is experiencing a nitrogen deficiency. And so once you know how to do it, it's not difficult. Phosphorus turns your plant red. All right, if you have a phosphorus deficiency, your plant will turn red. All right, and in terms of basic information, you can find basic information about your field on the internet for free nowadays. You just go on a website called SoilWeb, look up your GPS location, and it will legitimately just give you your pH. You don't have to, you don't have to really, do anything. And if you have a high pH, there are only certain soil molecules that are responsible for raising the pH of your soil, right? I mean, it's like if you have high pH, you're not going to end up with a high pH because you have a lot of phosphorus in your soil. All right, if you have a high soil pH, you're going to have a high soil pH most likely because of calcium or magnesium. Unless you have like severely over fertilized your field, or you live next to a beach or something like that, it's almost always either going to be calcium or magnesium. All right, and so it's not confusing, right? Once you know how to do it, it's not confusing. It just takes a long time to learn how to do it. And the thing is that if you mess it up even slightly, you will not get the results. Guaranteed. If you mess it up even a little bit, your grass will stop growing, or your grass will not grow enough to where you can actually make any sort of real money on it. And so but the whole thing, what I got going on right now, and even as of today, I am already up to the eyeballs in money. It's not exactly an idea, and this is a very realistic time to take a look at it. Because, this whole thing that I got going on right now, right? Like, if I legitimately felt like farming 10.5 acres for the rest of my life, if that was genuinely what I felt like doing, I could always come back and do it, right? And even then, it wouldn't really matter, all right? I would say, I probably make somewhere around $40,000 a month. All right, that's probably about what I make right now. It's somewhere between $25,000 and $40,000 a month. That's about how much I make. And the whole thing about it is, like, if I legitimately felt like coming back and doing this for the rest of my life, I could always do that, right? And in this situation that I'm in right now, like, I'm up to the eyeballs in money. I'm still making money, right? And it's not in exactly an ideal situation. I don't, and I've already even said this. After a certain point, money, like, once you start to understand it, money just kind of becomes an illusion. Money, it's like, because all of this costs me nothing, right? All of this costs me nothing. All right, this actually makes me money. I didn't spend any money, right? All of this makes me money. And all of the money that I need for this comes from the business, right? And it puts extra money in my pocket. None of this costs me anything. Money's kind of an illusion, right? And I talk about this, money is negligible, right? And I'm gonna talk about my whole perspective on it right now, because I'm kind of in this wonky situation where I am up to the eyeballs in money. I am still making more money, right? And I've effectively told myself to just sit on my hands for 1 month. If I just sit on my hands for 1 month, but even if I sit on my hands for 1 month and then I liquidate my animals, let's say I liquidate 10 animals at 650 pounds next month, I mean, I would still have to find a way to invest, about another, 35 animals worth of money. If I took that money, and then I would have to invest another 30 to 35 animals worth of money, right? This is not exactly an ideal situation, and I've talked about, in terms of how I see it, I don't ever want to be up to the eyeballs in money. That's not the goal, right? That's not the plan. Right? Like, in all honesty, like, in just complete sincerity, if it was, I would rather go to the sale barn next week and buy 20 cattle. I would rather do that than just sit on my hands for the next month. I would rather go to the sale barn next week and buy 20 cattle. All right, I would rather do that. I don't want to be sitting on my hands with a large amount of money, and I'm still making money, right? And I was talking about this, for the last couple of days, right? Or I don't know if I only spoke about it yesterday, but, like, when I take a look at my balance sheet, when I take a look at my assets, I reasonably anticipate that my assets will appreciate over the next, my assets will continue to appreciate for the next 3, 4, 5 months. My assets are stable, all right? My assets are stable, and they will continue to appreciate for about 3, 4, 5 months, right? But that's another Brayford animal over there. You see, that's another one. That's another Brayford animal. But my assets will continue to appreciate for the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, all right? They're stable. I'm not worried about it. And in all honesty, when I have a balance sheet like this, and I am sitting on cash reserves, right? I have cash reserves. I have money reserves. I've been selling animals, and I've actually reduced the size of my balance sheet, and I actually made a profit. I made a profit of about 50% on my money, right? And so when I take a look at it, I wouldn't, and in terms of like this herd right here, like if I have a herd like this, right, and I have money, I would leverage against my money. All right, I would be willing to leverage against my money, because this herd right here is not going to really have any problems. I would be willing to bet that these animals on my field right now have very minimal, if any, problems at all. All right, this is what I would consider a stabilized asset. All right, and so when I have a stabilized asset, I would be willing to leverage. I would be willing to leverage. Why not? Right? I mean, why not? I mean, it gives me tax benefits. I'm not worried about it. My assets are stable. They're going up in value. I have reasonably anticipated that my assets will go up in value for the next 3, 4, 5 months. Right? And that increase in value is an unrealized gain. That will create a safety buffer for me using leverage, right? It won't matter, right? And so, in this situation, I would be willing to leverage. But if I leveraged, I would have to go and buy 20 animals next week. And that would be just to keep my balance sheet at a 70% leverage. I would have to go and buy 25 animals next week. And then next month, I would be selling another 10. And if I sold 10 and I made enough money to buy 20, I wouldn't buy 20, I would buy 30. Right? And then the month after that, I'll have another 10 at 12 animals ready for sale. And if I sell another 10, 12 animals and I make enough money to buy 20, 25 animals, 20, 24 animals, I'd have to buy another 30, 35 animals. And then the month after that, I would have to buy another, I would have another 12 ready for market. And then after that, I will have 20 animals ready for market because I will be selling the animals that I bought next week, right? I wouldn't be selling 10 anymore. I'd be selling 20. And so, and this is a very honest time to take a look at it. This is a very realistic time to take a look at it. When I say, the money's not going to do anything. All right, the money's not going to do anything. All right, I would rather grow my business. It's like, oh, well, don't you want to go on a vacation? No, I don't want to go on a vacation. All right. Oh, don't you want to go and buy yourself a Lamborghini? And don't you want to go to the Gucci store? And no, I don't want to do any of that. All right, I don't want a Lamborghini. I don't want to go on a vacation. I don't want any of that stuff, right? I want to grow my business. I legitimately just want to grow my business. That's honestly what I want to do. Oh, don't you want to go and do? No, I don't want to do anything. I legitimately just want to grow my business. All right. I want to grow my business, but if I grew my business, you'd have to understand that I would have to increase the size of my business by 250% in the next 3 months. Just to reinvest the capital that my business makes and then take a very small amount of leverage against it. But this is a very, realistic time to take a look at it. Right? I'm already up to the eyeballs in money. My assets are still appreciating. I'm making more money. The money's not doing anything. And, in all honesty, if I was legitimately just going to run my business and move forward with my business, I would have to buy another 20 animals next week, 25 animals next week. All right. And then the month after that, I would have another 10 animals ready for market. And if I sold those 10 animals, they will probably hit the scale at about 650. All right. And if the average weight of the animal that I have brought home is 225 and I sell them at 650, then I will be making about a 100% return on my money. I will have to buy 2 times as many animals, right? Right, if I sold 10, I'd have to buy 20. And if I sold 10 and I made enough money to buy 20 and I wanted to keep my leverage at 70%, I still have the other animals at home. I still have the other 24 animals at home. The other 24 animals are stabilized and have gone up in value. Then I would leverage against my earnings. Right, and so I have to figure something out. All right, I have to figure something out there that, but even and I've it's whatever. I've even just said it in this video. Like if I sat here on this 10.5 acre field for the rest of my life, right, and I made my 350, 450, 500 grand a year, and if that was what I did for all eternity, I could still effectively just buy anything on the entire planet. This is very, and I talk about this as a very important thing about, understanding about money. After a certain point, unless you're talking about like buying super yachts or anything like that, the money does not buy anything. This is something that you will see. This is something that I saw as my wealth grew. Because as my wealth grew, I actually saw this stuff. The thing about, after a certain point, the money does not do anything. It does not do anything. There's nothing that you can really even buy. Nothing. I mean, legitimately, it's like, oh, well, I want to buy myself a brand new F350. Well, that'll take me about 1 month. All right, I want to buy 20 more cattle. Well, I can just, sell 10 of mine and then go and buy 20 more. The money does not do anything. It does not do anything. After a certain point, the money does not do anything, but I will say that the big major benefit of generating such a large amount of money, the one major benefit for it is that I no longer worry about money at all. 0%. I'm not concerned about it. Money is of zero concern to me. It does not matter. That's the one major benefit. Effectively, any time that I go and do anything, I don't have to worry about the cost. Granted that I'm not going to be an idiot. Granted that I'm not going to go to the casino and gamble money. Granted that I'm not going to go and buy drugs. Granted that I'm not going to go and be an idiot to buy 3 Lamborghinis. Granted that I don't do anything like that. I don't worry about the cost of anything. I don't have to worry about it. It doesn't matter to me. Oh, I need to put gas in my truck. I need to put diesel in my tractor. I'll just go and do it. Oh, I need to put new tires on my truck. I'll just do it. Oh, I think I need and even in all honesty, within about 3 months, here's the thing, and here's just to put things in perspective, because when I re-leverage myself is when I will go out and I will actually spend some money. And I will be re-leveraging myself in about 3 months. And here's the thing. In 3 months, I would be willing to bet that within 3 months, I will have enough money to buy 60 cattle, a brand new truck, and a brand new trailer. And I will still be net positive over $10,000 a month. I would be willing to bet. And, even after I bought everything, I will still produce more than $10,000 a month net positive. I would be willing to bet in 3 months I legitimately have enough money to buy myself a new truck, a new trailer, and 60 cattle, all on my own money. Entirely on my own money. I would be willing to bet that's what's going to happen within 3 months. All right, and after a certain point, the money does not do anything. And I've always talked about the whole thing about money, and in terms of success, it's a one-man journey, and don't go in to take your advice from poor people. All right, because if you have poor people, and the thing about being poor, and and I talk about this, just very, very often. The whole thing about being poor is that if you've become poor, you will see everything as a poor person. You will see everything as a poor person. Everything. You will see the world as a poor person. I guarantee it, and there is no reason to be poor. It's not going to do you any good. It's not going to do anybody any good. All right, being poor is of zero benefit. All right, at the end of the day, if you want to be a good person with a lot of money. All right, if you being poor is not going to do anything. And I've always talked about the big idea of wealth, the big idea of money. And when I show it from my perspective, right? When I show you it from my perspective, none of this costs me anything. None of this costs me anything. I would actually say that I'm net positive about $15,000 a month, maybe a little bit more. My business makes, my business makes, I make somewhere around 350 and 500 grand a year. That, this does not cost me anything. None of this costs me anything. If I legitimately stopped doing this, I would lose money. Right? That's the big idea of generating wealth. Right? And this my business makes me money even when I'm sleeping. If I fall asleep and I wake up 8 hours later, I would legitimately have made myself about $450 while I was sleeping. That's the big idea, right? None of this costs me anything. If I stopped doing this, I would lose money. That's the whole idea of having assets, right? That's the whole idea of having an asset that is equitable and produces a positive return. Once you understand this fundamentally, it will change the perspective. I would hope that it opens your mind. Once you have a good asset that is equitable, and realistically you're looking for an asset that you can knowledgeably appreciate yourself. If you are given the asset, you can make the asset go up in monetary value. And when you can do that, it's like printing your own money. It is legitimately, it feels like printing your own money. You can just you can make as much money as you, and after a certain point, the money's not even going to do anything. The money's not going to do anything. All right, and at the end of the day, the whole thing, and I've spoken about the whole idea, and I know that this, and I don't say this with the intentions, I'm not a malicious person, but you have to understand, poor people, there's a reason they're poor, right? And let's say that you gave a poor person money. Do you know what's going to happen? They will bankrupt. They will lose all of it. It's not like, oh my God, now that I have $500, now that I have $5,000, I can go and I can invest this money and make an infinite return. People are not going to, once you have become poor, you're stuck being poor. Guarantee it. And, you're effectively stuck being poor for the rest of your life. I guarantee it. All right. And the whole thing about it is, if you give a poor person money, and I've spoken about this, and, let's talk about the idea of uneven wealth distribution, right? The idea of uneven wealth distribution. The reason that I make money, is because I feed people, right? And the quality of my work is extremely high. I legitimately managed to do better than the commercial standard on a backyard by myself, right? Like, I actually managed to do just about better than the commercial average on a backyard by myself. Legitimately, I started this business by myself. I buy my cattle by myself, and I effectively raise them by myself. And I managed to do better than the commercial average in many terms, right? In many ways, there are things that the commercial standard does do better than me. Particularly the scaling, right? If you're only trading commodities, you can scale infinitely, because you have, access to commodities all the time, and et cetera, et cetera. There are things, that the commodity or that the commercial markets do very well. But when you take a look at my situation and you're taking a look at it, this is very impressive, right? This is borderline like one of the most incredible farms that anyone has ever seen, right? Legitimately, I'm a guy by myself on a backyard by myself, right? Running these cattle on my own, started myself my own farm, and I make a massive sum of money. This is incredible, right? Borderline the most incredible thing that anyone has ever seen. Legitimately, right? At the end of the day, that's why I got paid. I got paid because I did extremely well, and I fed people. I give people, I grow food for people. If people, if we don't have farmers, America is the largest exporter of food on the planet. If Americans stopped farming, the world would starve en masse. All right, you have to understand this. And I've talked about this whole idea of uneven wealth distribution. So if we're going to talk about uneven wealth distribution, right, and when you take a look at what I do, you have to effectively understand that this is like a 0.000000001 percentile, right? You may never see anybody do anything like this ever again, not even to the 10% mark. So when we talk about uneven wealth distribution, I've always said that wealthy people have assets, right? So if we were going to, what is the big idea for the poor people, right? What is your big idea? Oh, well, maybe the rich people should be required to give their wealth away, right? And I've even spoken about this. If you're lower middle class, for you to go from being lower middle class to being middle class, you have to make an extra $2,000 a month, right? For you to go from being middle class to being upper middle class, you have to make an extra $2,000 a month. That's effectively where 90% of the economy is. 90% of, if not more, is effectively in that range. If you are lower middle class and you make an extra $2,000 a month, you're middle class. If you're middle class and you make an extra $2,000 a month, you're upper middle class. So let's say that you're lower middle class and you believe that it's unfair that there are people in the world who are upper middle class. So you're saying that it's unfair because somebody makes $4,000 a month more than you. right? Is that, so what's the, what's the solution, right? Oh, they should be required to give their extra $4,000 away. Is that because that's communism? That's communism. And if we talk about, in terms of large scale, and I've even spoken about this, like if we were to just evenly distribute the wealth, let's just say we did it. We went full communist, like a bunch of idiots. We've decided that communism was a good idea. The rich people should be required to give everything away. If we gave everything away, if everything was put on an even playing field, and then everybody was just left to do what they were gonna do, if you came back 2 years later, I would have effectively just ate everybody alive. I guarantee it. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If you cannot do the work, then you cannot do the work. I guarantee it. I would have effectively it would be right back to where we are. Right back. Effectively everybody would fail. And then you would have me. Right? And then we're right back to right where we started. And I've spoken about this, the whole idea of money kind of being an illusion. Money is kind of like this, it's kind of like this illusion, right? Because when you understand that you can use money to make money, it's like you can print it for yourself. Money is kind of an illusion. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Money is negligible. If I legitimately had nothing but $5,000, if I had $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in less than 2 years by starting myself a cattle farm, and I could do that with a 100% guarantee. I would be able to do it, and it would not be difficult at all. 0% difficulty. I could turn $5,000 into $100,000 in 2 years, less than 2 years. All right, and then I would continue to compound the money. My money is kind of an illusion. Like, once you understand that you can actually use money to make more money, money kind of turns into the money is negligible. It's like printing your own money. You can just print it for yourself. You can just print it for yourself. Money kind of becomes an illusion. None of this costs me anything. I think, and this is very important to understand, none of this costs me anything. All of this costs me nothing. If I legitimately stopped doing this, I would hemorrhage money. I would hemorrhage hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I would legitimately start losing money I would start losing massive sums of money. None of this costs me anything. All right, this is, that's, money's kind of an illusion. All right, it's not I don't know exactly how to describe it. But money is negligible. A lot of times, the reason when you have poor people, the reason that they're poor is not because they're a good person. It's not because the world is unfair. The world will always be unfair. All right, I don't know how else to put it. And just to put things in very realistic perspective, if I only had $5,000, if $5,000 was all I had, I could legitimately turn that $5,000 into $100,000 in less than 2 years, and I could do it with 0 difficulty, and I would guarantee it, honest to God. God as my witness, I could do it. It would not be difficult. Even when I'm looking at my balance sheet right now, right, my assets are stable. Right, I already have enough money to fill up my preconditioning pens about 2 times. Right, I have animals that will be ready for market in the next month. I may even hold them until a higher weight. Right, I anticipate that my assets will continue to appreciate for the next 3, 4, or 5 months. And when my assets have finished appreciating, when my assets have appreciated to their market value, I would anticipate that I can expand my balance sheet by more than 50 to 75%. By just reinvesting my capital. And if I just reinvest my capital and my debt load is 70% today and I grow my balance sheet by 75%, then I would have to leverage against some of my assets to keep my balance sheet at a 70% debt, 70% debt, right? And it's a compounding effect. It is a compounding effect. Granted that I continue to stay in category number 3, but right now I am for 1 month, I am in category number 2. I am in category number 2 for 1 month. I am effectively just sitting here making money. I'm not growing my business. I'm not doing anything. I'm not failing. I'm not growing my business. I'm just sitting here and I'm collecting money, which is not an ideal situation. It is not an ideal situation. The money's not going to do anything. The money's not going to do anything. If anything, I am guaranteed to lose about 1/3 of it because of taxes. All right, the money's not going to do anything. All right, but I am in category number 2 for 1 month. I am in category number 2 right now for just 1 month. I told myself, just sit tight for 1 month. I don't know, go and do something, right? But then I thought about it. It's like, do I want to go on a vacation? No, I don't want to go on a vacation. Do I want to go and buy myself, a bunch of designer clothing? No, I don't want to go and buy myself. Do I want to go and buy myself a Lamborghini? No, I don't want to buy myself a Lamborghini. Okay, I don't want any of that stuff. All right, I want to grow my business. But even right now, even today, I could fill up my preconditioning pens twice. If I brought home 5 animals at a time, I could fill up my preconditioning pens twice. All right, I could fill up my preconditioning pens twice without selling any more animals. All right, and I will have animals ready for market next month. Even if I raise the market average weight to 800, I will still be forced to liquidate within 3 months. And if I liquidate at 800 and not 650, I will make more money per animal. All right, and so I got to figure something out. All right, because I am always up to the eyeballs in money all the time, and it's not doing anything. The money's not doing anything. It's not doing anything. If anything, I would rather invest the capital. The money's not doing anything. I am up to the eyeballs in money all the time. All right, and my assets are still going up in value, even if I raise the market average weight. Even if I raise the average weight from 650 to 800, I will end up making more money. My assets are appreciating for like the next 3 or 4 or 5 months. Even if I sit on my hands for the next 3 months, I will still generate a large sum of money. All right, if I legitimately sit on my hands for the next 3 months and then I liquidate all of my cattle at the same time, I will legitimately make enough money to grow my balance sheet by about 75%. Just from taking the money that my business makes and putting it back into my business. I have to figure out what I'm going to do. All right, I am making a drastic sum of money. All right, and I don't know how else to put it. It just is what it is. All right, I am making a massive sum of money. And it's not doing anything. All right, it's actually kind of agitating, because it's like, I'm making such a large amount of money. I want to grow my business with it. I'm looking to grow my business with it. I'm always up to the eyeballs in money. I need to find a way to invest about 400% more capital. I don't want to go on a vacation. All right, I don't want a Lamborghini. I don't want any. I want to grow my business. All right, I legitimately just want to grow my business. I'm not going to say I want. I believe, want is not the right word. I don't know how, I'm looking to grow my business. All right, I have zero desire to buy a Lamborghini. I don't know how else to put it. I don't want to buy legitimately, I don't want a Lamborghini. I don't want designer clothes. I don't want to go on a vacation. All right, I don't want to go out and, and have fun. I don't want to do that. All right, I'm looking, I would like to go and buy myself more cattle. All right, I would like to go and buy myself more cattle. That's what I would like to do, all right? But, I'm just sitting tight for 1 month. I told myself to sit tight for 1 month. If I sit tight for 1 month, I can liquidate 10 animals next month, and I will still be up to the eyeballs in money, but I can go and buy myself some more animals, and I can get myself something to work on. But that's the big issue right now, is that I am always up to the eyeballs in money. Always, all the time. And if I were to reinvest my money, if I were to reinvest the money that my business makes, just the money that my business makes, I would have to buy 20 animals, or I would have to buy 10 animals next week. I wouldn't leverage against it. If I just took the money that my business makes and I reinvested the money, I would actually have to buy about 12. Okay, I'd have to buy about 12. I'd have to buy about 12 animals next week. And then in a month, I would have to buy another 20 and I would be selling 10. And then in a month after that, I would be selling 12 and I would be buying 24. And then a month after that, I'd be selling another 12 and I'd be buying another 24. And then the month after that, maybe I don't sell any, but the month after that, I will end up selling 20. Well, excuse me, I will end up selling the 12 that I had, and then that would be, that would be 6 months. And then after that, I would be selling 20. And that would be if I used zero leverage, and I don't even know if it'd be the end of the year then. We would just be getting close to the end of the year, right? That's effectively the situation that I'm in right now. When you're watching me run my business, when you're looking at, when you're observing my balance sheet and I'm showing you my balance sheet, you have to understand that is the financial result. That is what you're looking at in terms of a financials. All right, this balance sheet produces a massive sum of money. What you're looking at right now is a farm that produces a massive excess of money. All right, I legitimately produce a drastic sum of money. This does not cost me anything. None of this costs me anything. I actually started this farm with about 5 animals. I started this farm with 5 animals. I raised the animals. I learned the cattle business and I reinvested my earnings. I leveraged against it and then I grew my business. I actually ended up growing my business by more than 1,000% in the last 2.5 years. And I would anticipate that I grow my business by more than 200% by the end of the year. It might even be more than, it will be somewhere between 250 and 400%. That's the goal. That's the goal. All right, I'm gonna say that's the goal. It's not like I want to do it. That's the goal. All right, that's the goal. And the reason that I have done this is because, sitting around and collecting money is complete. It's just, it doesn't, like I have zero desire to do that. I have zero desire to do that. If I legitimately felt like sitting on this 10.5 acre field for the rest of my life and making $40,000 a month, if that was legitimately what I felt like doing, I could always come back and do it. All right, I can always just come back and do it. I have zero desires to sit on a 10.5 acre field and collect $40,000 a month for the rest of my life. I have zero desire to do that. Zero desire. And it wouldn't, okay, if I'm not growing my business, it wouldn't be 40,000. All right, because the 40,000, the reason that I make 40,000 is because, okay, you have to understand that if I sell 10, let's say that I sell 8 animals a month. If I sell 8 animals a month and I raise them for 5 months, that means I raised 40 animals, right? So I have 40 animals, and realistically, I have 50. My baseline is 50 because I do have the lease property, but I don't use the lease property when the weather, if the grass is not growing. So let's just say I sell 8 animals a month. If I sell 8 animals a month and I take that money and I reinvest all of the capital into buying commodity grade assets at commodity prices, I've effectively traded the money for assets, and I get to keep all of the money because when I do that, I get a tax write-off for the amount of money that I spent. For the amount of money that I invested, I get a tax write-off. That still leaves me with 32 animals at home. Those 32 animals have gone up in value. Right, and every month that goes by, they continue to go up in value, granted that I do my part. Granted that they are still profitable, right? And, it's if I legitimately needed more money, I could just pay myself more. Genuinely, if I legitimately felt like I needed more money, I could just pay myself more. But I pay myself whatever I need. And my income is actually going up, and it's going up very quickly. I would anticipate that my income goes up by over 200% by the end of the year. My income will go up more than 200%, maybe even drastically more than 200%. All right, it just is what it is. At the end of the day, what does it matter to me? Right? At the end of the day, I legitimately managed to become rich. Like, I don't know how else to put it. I genuinely make such an excessive amount of money that that no matter what I do, the cost does not matter. Granted that I'm not an idiot. It does not matter. I can legitimately, my bills don't matter to me. I can pay all of my bills 15 times over. All right, I can pay all of my bills, 8 times over every single month. My business is legitimately growing. My business is organically growing by itself by more than 10% a month. All right, you know, what does it matter to me? It doesn't. All right, I legitimately managed to make myself such a drastic amount of money that, you know, that I can effectively nothing, you know, effectively money does not matter to me at all anymore. 0%. And when you take a look at my balance sheet, when you're taking a look at this right here, this balance sheet right here, in the next 3 or 4 months will continue to appreciate. And by the time that I have finished appreciating my assets and I've liquidated my assets and I've reinvested my earnings, the earnings from this alone will the money that I make from doing this will legitimately grow my business by more than 75%. More than 75%, and it will take less than 3 or 4 months. I guarantee it. All right, my assets are appreciating, and I would reasonably anticipate that they appreciate for about 3 or 4 more months, maybe 5 for the real small ones. All right, and by the time my assets have finished appreciating and I have liquidated my assets and I've taken the capital and reinvested it, my business will grow by more than 75%. I guarantee it. All right, you know, that's what this is. Legitimately, I genuinely generate such a large amount of money farming that I can effectively do anything on the entire planet. I don't know how else to put it. Money is of zero concern to me. Legitimately zero. None. None whatsoever. I'm already up to the eyeballs in money. I'm already in a situation where even if I sit on my hands, I will still continue to make more money. And I'm already up to the eyeballs in money. All the time, effectively 24/7. That's what this is. This does not cost me anything. Legitimately, this costs me nothing. This makes me a massive sum of money. All right, and that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.